My name is Scotty and thanks for joining me in this sketching tutorial. I want to show you today how to sketch a person in 3 steps in a really loose and light way. Okay, so step number 1 is to go through the whole figure and sketch out all the main shapes. So I'm starting at the top here and I'm going to make my way all the way down each shape, and I compare each shape to the next shape. This is what you do when you're sketching straight to ink. You don't have to draw a mannequin in pencil. This is less accurate, but it's more expressive and loose. So after drawing the hat here and the hair, I've left a space for the face, and I've drawn in where I think that chin is. And you can see I compared the angle of the side of the right side of the hat and the left side of the hat, and I found that point where the chin was. You can see the main shape that it creates. It's almost a triangle. And now I have that face shape, I slightly adjust it here to make sure it's correct, and I can make my way down the rest of the figure. Okay, I'm going to do all these little details around the neck here, making that shape there between the chin and the coffee cup. Okay, now we can move down to the shoulders, this neck shape. So that's about the width. If I look at the reference, and I can see the width of the head and then compare it to the width of the shoulder. For a female, it's usually a little bit less than a head width. But because she's got a big jacket on, it looks about a head width here. Now you can see I am measuring out head lengths. So from the shoulder down towards the top of the ankles, there are 6 heads. So I've measured out 6 from the shoulder to the ankle, and that'll just help me as I'm sketching, give me a guide to place these shapes in the right position. To get the elbow, we go down 1.5 head, and now we can find the other elbow by going down 1.5 heads and putting a dot. We can sketch down to there. So we can keep things light and loose without creating solid construction lines, but have these loose and easy guides to follow. So that's little creases in there to create that shape there for the arm. So when I'm drawing hands, you can see here I'm just going to outline them. First I go for the back of the hand, and then I go for some shapes for the front of the hand. But make sure you don't try and put too much detail in. I've almost just left them as the main shapes with a couple of dots to show where the gaps are for the fingers. And here for that second hand, it's not even drawing those fingers, it's just the outline. Okay, so now to start the bottom half. So we have this jacket which covers up where the crotch is. Usually we go from the shoulders down to the crotch, 3 heads. But because it's covered up, we're just going to compare the top half of the jacket to the length and just have a guess. So just put it in, even if it's a little bit off. Make those angles of the jacket expressive. A few little wobbly lines here and there makes a big difference. But then when we get to the knee, that's important to get that right. So we go down 3 heads to the crotch, and then 1.5, so that is 4.5 heads down from the shoulder to the knee. So that's where the knee comes out. And now we do the knee, and we add little wrinkles here, all pointing towards the middle of the knee. That helps you see that is the knee. Okay, so then this next leg has to look like she's balancing on it. As I'm sketching all of these parts, I'm trying not to add too much detail here. Like I didn't draw the split of the jacket yet. I'm just trying to get all the main shapes first. So this part here where I've finished up to is 6 heads down from the shoulder. So you can see a little dot there just on the left where I've come down to, which is really handy. It's hard to measure these things, so I find having those dots just a great way to build your shapes in this first step. And occasionally I count down just to double check. Especially with a standing figure, it makes a big difference that your feet aren't too long or too short. So now draw that little shape where the ankle is, where the sock is, and now the shoe. And it's pointing towards us. You want that front round bit of the shoe to be circular, and then dip in and then go back to another circle under the ankle. This shoe at the back here is a little bit trickier to actually show because it's leaning against the wall. And I'm comparing that tip of the shoe to the other shoe to see how far I should go down. And then I think those laces there, that detail helps it look like it's sitting back against the wall. And that brings me to my second step, which is now to fill in all the details. So details like the shoelaces, pockets, buttons, and all those little extra things that make the sketch look more detailed and interesting. And the biggest details that we need to add, you might not add in any extra detail, but the most important thing that we do need to add is the facial features. Now we go onto the face. So we can see here that's the hat is covering up the forehead. Usually I go from the hairline down to the chin and I can divide the face up into 3. But because I don't have that, I'm just going to start where I think the eyebrows start and then go from eyebrows down to the chin and divide the face into 2 with the bottom of the nose. And now for the eyes. So you can use the dot method as well for the eyes. So 2/3 up from the bottom of the nose to the eyebrows, we can put the corners of the eyes. That's where those 2 dots were. And it's about the width of a nose. And then we can add little simple lines for the eyes. Very simple. So focus on that top eyelash and then a tiny dark spot for the iris. And now we can go to the mouth, and I like to put 2 dots either side of the nose, which is just above halfway between the chin and the bottom of the nose. And then we concentrate on that gap between the lips as a dark line, and then another line under that split is the shadow under the bottom lip. And finally some little details, adding little dots around the eyes just to suggest that bottom eyelid and the bridge of the nose. And I wanted to add a tiny bit of contrast to the sketch, so I've shaded in the straps to the bag. I was considering doing the hands, but then I think you'll lose all the detail. So let's just keep it to the straps here. Okay, step number 3 is to add a really light wash on our expressive line work. I'm going to be using my Pentel water brush pen, but you could use a brush like a number 4. And for highlights later, I like to use my Posca fine tip marker. We have to give that a good shake before we use it. So I'm going to start with a burnt sienna for the skin tone. So really give it a nice amount of water, and I can test it on the side of the page to see if it's light enough. Make sure your ink is dry, because this is the most painful stage if you add your light wash on and then the ink starts to run on the face. So that's great. See how light that is? Sort of has a nice gradient from the top to the bottom. And then I have a rose madder here at the top, you can see, and we can add that into the cheeks. Warmth around the middle of the face really helps draw your eye into that area of the face. Okay, so next I've chosen yellow ochre for the hat. Now I have an indigo. I'm going to show you here, mixing that on the plate there. You can just see the nice transparency there in the wash. And then we go over to the pants here. I'm going to change that color because I think that it might make it a bit more interesting compared to the jacket. So I'm making a bit of a contrast. Now I've got some black to add to the gloves, and I was leaving a tiny bit of white there in places to show that they have a bit of a glossy surface. And we can also add that black to the shoes here. So next we're going to choose a vibrant color for the jacket. I'm using cadmium scarlet for this color here. So I'm holding the sketchbook here at a bit of an angle. And you can see here as I add the water, it pools, and the pooling runs down to the bottom of each section. Okay, now we can add some ultramarine blue. We'll put some yellow here. It's all very just light colors. One thing I wanted to point out here is that you can see that I've left little white gaps everywhere. Okay, so I've let the whole sketch completely dry, and now I can add in some shadows. Just very lightly. It shouldn't stand out too much. But we'll see here that the light comes down onto her face, so there's lots of shadow underneath her neck and the shoulder where those wrinkles are, and underneath each arm. So just adding a bit more, especially here under the legs. You can see there's quite a dark shadow there, so I made sure that was very dark. And that back foot sitting behind there in the shadow, away from the light. Now for just a few final touches around the face, especially just above the eyes there, between the eyes and the eyebrows. And a little tiny bit below the eyes, under the nose, the top lip, and under the neck there. Make sure that has a good amount of shadow under there. And that makes that whole face pop out. To add to that looseness, we're going to add some splatters. So I just put it in that paint I already have for the jacket, and just tap my water brush pen. It's already got lots of water in it, so it's very easy to tap and let that color splash onto the page. Also think maybe like blue, so I'm going to choose cerulean blue and create a little wash here on the side. You can't see that, but that's over the side there, and then splat it around the pants because that is also a blue color. So that connects to that there. Okay, so now I've got my Posca pen and looking for glossy surfaces or edges of things that need highlights. So these gloves are a classic example. You need a little bit of glints there for the highlights. And through the hat there was nothing to indicate those nice little wavy creases, so you can use the pen there too. I always like to put a little sparkle on the nose or around the face where there are highlights, like on the bottom lip. If you need to sketch along with something like this in real time, I'm going to put the full uncut version on my Patreon page, so you can check that out right there. Thank you to all my supporters on Patreon for making these videos possible. You can check out another tutorial right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.